From Hallie's unexpected murder in Season 1 to the tragic death of Otis in a boiler room in Season 8, these are Chicago Fire characters who died and why. Killing off Hallie Thomas was actually a strategic move for the One Chicago universe. If you recall, our first introduction to her is that she's Casey's fiancé and a physician. They'd been dating for 8 years and pretty much had an on-again, off-again relationship. But one time, Casey pops in to visit her at the clinic she's working at with a surprise lunch. Hallie's going through some files and notices something weird, but she puts it aside. Later, out of the blue, the crew at Firehouse 51 get a call to rush over to the clinic because it's on fire. Casey and Severide rush in like the superheroes that they are and find Hallie trapped inside a locked security cage used for drug storage. They rescue her, but sadly, she doesn't make it. But here comes the twist. When the medical examiner's report finally comes back, it reveals something shocking. Hallie was actually killed before the fire even started. She was struck in the back of her head. Turns out, the clinic was involved in some illegal drug trafficking stuff. Hallie and one of the nurses accidentally stumbled upon their dirty little secret. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. During the investigation that followed, Antonio Dawson told Casey straight up that Hallie was murdered before the fire broke out, and the culprit was none other than Timothy Campbell. But here's the twist of fate. Hank Voight ends up fatally shooting Timothy. Yep, Voight from Chicago PD, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is how that show started. Timothy was such a hated character on the show that fans were actually happy he got killed, but the award for the most hated villain on the show definitely goes to Vince Keeler. We first see him in Season 1's Tonight is the Night episode when he takes shelter in Firehouse 51 and finds out that his niece has been hit by a car. What makes things worse is the brother of the guy driving the car was at the firehouse too. Long story short, he swears to take revenge for his niece on Severide by kidnapping his half-sister, Katie Nolan. Now, Kelly and his father don't have the best relationship, but despite that, he gets involved in the whole situation too. It's a surprising twist because you wouldn't expect them to work together. The duo set aside their differences and focus on saving Katie. It's a big deal because it's the first step towards repairing their damaged relationship. They've got a long way to go, but it's a start. Now, here's the thing about Keeler's death. It's quite different from the usual emotional deaths that Chicago Fire is known for. People were more relieved than sad when Keeler was killed. He's not going to be missed, that's for sure. Because usually Chicago Fire has us sad for weeks when they decide to kill off a character. Personally, Rebecca Jones's death was pretty shattering. She grew up in a family full of CFD officers, but her own father didn't think women belong in the firefighting world. It made things tough for her at the firehouse, trying to fit in and facing her father's attempts to sideline her. Casey and Bowden, however, stood up to her father and refused to fire her. But then, Gabby accidentally spilled the beans about her father's scheme, and Rebecca felt hurt and betrayed. She took off running, with Mills chasing after her. It got pretty emotional when she tried to kiss him, but he turned her down and she hopped in a cab and disappeared. Casey and Bowden decided they wouldn't let her go because they believed in her skills and refused to let her father's bias win. Meanwhile, Rebecca found comfort in Christopher Harriman at Molly's. She opened up about her decision to take the desk job her father offered and even said how he hated her because she survived the car crash while her mother didn't. Harriman told her she could always come to Molly's for support. Back at her place, Rebecca wrote a heartfelt letter to Gabby, pouring out her feelings, and left it on the kitchen table. Then she walked away from everything. Gabby then got a devastating call from the police, saying that Rebecca had taken her own life. It hit everyone hard, and the loss was incredibly heartbreaking. But for Gabriella Dawson, the losses just kept on coming. She lost her partner, Leslie Shea, in the first episode of Season 3. Her death was one of the most devastating moments in the show's history. During the Season 2 finale, Firehouse 51 responded to a fire, but unfortunately, an explosion caused the roof to collapse while they were still inside. Shea was struck in the head by a falling pipe and didn't make it. But the worst part is that it wasn't until the Season 3 premiere that we found out she was no more. Her loss devastated the firehouse, but it hit Severide and Dawson especially hard. Dawson was her partner, and Shea was Severide's best friend. What makes it even more intense is that Dawson and Shea had switched places inside the building. So it easily could have been him who didn't make it, leaving Gabby with survivor's guilt. It took some time, but eventually they came to terms with the tragedy and found a way to move forward. I feel like Mouch is pretty much in the same situation at the end of season 11, and as we wait for season 12, no one knows if he'll make it or not. But going by the usual Chicago Fire MO, they're gonna have us crying for Mouch right at the beginning of the season until we know for sure we're not adding him to the list of characters who died. But there was more heartbreak to follow after Gabby in season 3 when Wallace Bowden Sr. died. It was gut-wrenching when Chief Bowden reconnected with his father, only to find out that he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Chief Bowden, who was always seen as the rock-solid support for Firehouse 51, was suddenly vulnerable. Seeing him lost and struggling to cope was heart-shattering. Bowden wanted his father to watch his grandson grow up and spend quality time together. But that simple wish felt so out of reach. Unfortunately, Bowden's time with his father was cut short. Just a few days into his visit, Bowden Sr. passed away. The pain and grief Chief Bowden experienced during this time reminded us that even the strongest can be shattered by personal loss. And like Wallace, another heartbreaking family death was that of Jimmy's younger brother, Danny Borelli, in season 4. He joins as a candidate on Truck 81, and not long after, Danny gets trapped under debris when a building collapses during a call. Jimmy, desperate to save his brother, becomes reckless and risks his own life as debris falls around him. This forces Chief Bowden to intervene and pull Jimmy away from the situation physically. The incident takes a toll on Jimmy and Chief Bowden's relationship. While there wasn't much time to develop a strong connection with Danny's character, it was Jimmy's struggle after his brother's death that really added depth to his character. Watching Jimmy grapple with the loss and the guilt he feels is truly difficult to witness. But I think the death of Otis was the one that surprised us all. He was an OG member of the Chicago Fire cast, and his exit from the show left fans devastated. It all happened during the season 7 finale, when Firehouse 51 rushed to a fire at a mattress factory. Unfortunately, a boiler explosion triggered a backdraft that violently slammed Otis against a steel door. The impact caused the door to close, shielding the other firefighters from the blast, but leaving Otis badly injured. Despite everyone's best efforts, he couldn't recover from his injuries and died in the hospital. It was a blunt reminder that in the world of Chicago Fire, no one is ever truly safe. In a touching moment at the hospital, Otis shared something in Russian with his close friend Joe Cruz before his passing. It was later revealed that he said, "Brother, I will be with you always." These words highlighted the bond between the firefighter and Otis's lasting impact on his colleagues. His exit from the show was difficult for both the characters and fans. His death will forever be remembered by the Firehouse 51 crew. So there you have it, folks. From Hallie's unexpected murder in season 1 to the tragic death of Otis in a boiler room in season 8, these are Chicago Fire characters who died and why.